Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going kind of into the world of manufacturing,
Manufacturing.
but not like, robots and
Right.
AI taking over and stuff like
Of
that. More like the nitty-gritty.
Down and dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, everyday pressures and, things that go wrong and, like, how do you deal with it kind of a thing.
Exactly, like the human element of it all.
Yeah. So, our guide for this journey is an excerpt from an audiobook, The Goal, a process of ongoing improvement by Elihu M. Goldratt and Jeff Cox.
Now, this book is interesting because it kind of reads like a business novel.
A novel.
Yeah, story format.
It's like a story, but we can learn stuff from it.
Exactly. It's a fun way to learn about business principles, and in this case, specifically the theory of constraints.
Okay, so to set the scene, imagine you're like the plant manager at this factory.
Okay.
Machines are humming, people are working, you got deadlines,
Yeah.
everything's going, it's going.
It's going.
But then like all these crazy things start happening.
Yeah, our main character, he's got a rough morning. He gets to work,
Oh, no.
and his parking spot is taken
Oh.
by his boss.
What?
The division VP, who's there waiting for him with some not so good news.
Oh, this is bad news.
Bad news, yeah.
So like what's the bad news?
Well, the plant's losing money,
Okay.
and the VP gives him basically an ultimatum, 3 months to turn things around, or
Oh, what?
they're going to shut the plant down.
Oh my gosh, that's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah, huge pressure, and not just for him. He's thinking about all the employees and their families.
Right, hundreds of people's jobs.
Exactly.
So how did it even get to this point?
Well, it all started with, one unhappy client.
Ah,
A major order was 7 weeks late.
7 weeks.
Yeah. So the client calls the VP at home furious,
Oh, gee.
and that's what sets this whole chain of events in motion.
Okay, so the VP rushes over to the plant, right?
Yep. Demands immediate action, starts disrupting workflows, and it really puts a lot of pressure on everyone.
Oh, I can only imagine. So everyone's stressed out.
Yeah, and in the midst of all this chaos, there's this skilled machinist, Tony,
Okay.
who is just so frustrated
Yeah.
that he walks off the job.
Oh, he quits.
He quits, yeah.
Wow.
But before leaving, he tries to finish up a rush order.
Okay.
But in his haste, he makes a mistake, and the machine malfunctions.
Oh, no.
And it's not just any machine, it's the factory's only NCX-10 machine.
And what's so special about that?
Well, this machine is vital to their whole operation.
Oh, no. So now they have a missing expert, a broken machine, and a deadline.
Yep, our plant manager is in a tough spot.
So what would you do?
Well, it's easy to feel overwhelmed in that situation,
Right.
but I think it highlights something really interesting about systems.
Like that.
It's how one problem like that late order can trigger a whole cascade of events with some serious consequences.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly.
But it makes you wonder, is it just bad luck, or are there bigger issues at play here?
That's a great question, and it's where the theory of constraints comes in. It encourages us to look beyond just the immediate crisis and try to identify the root causes, the bottlenecks that are holding the whole system back.
So instead of just reacting to the fire, you're
Yeah,
trying to prevent the fire from starting in the first place.
exactly.
I like that. Okay, so this story is not just about, machines breaking down. It's really about people
Right.
and the pressure they're under and how decisions at the top can impact the entire system.
Absolutely. And speaking of people, there's actually a twist to the story.
Oh, a twist.
The head of production thinks that Tony may have sabotaged the machine on purpose.
What's...
Out of anger.
Yeah, it's possible.
Wow.
But it also makes us think about what would drive someone to that point.
Yeah.
Was it deliberate sabotage or just a mistake made under extreme pressure?
Yeah, like what kind of environment leads to that?
Exactly.
So we often focus on the technical parts of a problem, but sometimes it's the human factors that are the real root cause. Absolutely. And that's true in any complex system. You can't ignore the people involved, their motivations, their frustrations, and how leadership impacts all of that.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, so before we dive deeper into all of that, let's take a moment to just kind of absorb everything we've learned so far.
Okay.
So we got this plant that's like on the verge of shutting down.
Yeah.
This vital machine that's broken and a potentially disgruntled employee.
Right.
A lot going on. What really stood out to you from this whole situation?
It's interesting. This excerpt from The Goal really highlights something we see a lot in problem solving.
What's that?
This tendency to go for the quick fix
Okay.
instead of actually addressing the underlying issues.
Right, like just putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone isn't going to fix it.
Exactly. It's not a real solution, and we see that with the VP, right?
Yeah, like just yelling at everyone to work faster isn't really a solution.
Not really, and that's where this theory of constraints comes in.
Okay.
It's about taking a step back and trying to understand the whole system and identifying the bottlenecks, the things that are actually limiting the performance.
So instead of trying to make like every single part of the process more efficient,
Yeah,
you focus on the weakest link.
exactly. You find the bottleneck and you optimize that.
Okay, so in this case, the broken machine is the bottleneck.
It's the constraint.
So how do you even exploit a constraint? Like, can you really make a broken machine work miracles?
Well, it's not about making the machine work faster.
Right.
It's about looking at all the things that are impacting its performance.
Okay.
So, for example, the book talks about making sure that machine is never idle,
Okay.
always having a queue of parts ready to go.
So you're maximizing its use.
Exactly. And they also start doing quality control checks earlier in the process
Why?
so that defective parts don't even reach the machine.
That makes sense. So you're preventing delays and rework.
Exactly. You're preventing problems before they even reach the bottleneck.
So it's not just firefighting, it's like fire prevention.
Exactly. And, this theory of constraints, it's not just for factories.
Really?
It can apply to any system, even your personal life.
Okay, so how?
Well, think about it. Are there things in your work or your life that always seem to get stuck?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone has those.
Right. Are there patterns of stress or inefficiency?
Okay.
Maybe there's a bottleneck you haven't identified yet.
That's interesting. Like what?
It could be anything, procrastination habit,
Okay.
disorganization, maybe even something external like a long commute
Right?
that's eating up your time once you find that bottleneck.
Yeah.
You can start to address it strategically.
I'm starting to see how this is like a really practical tool.
It is. It can have a huge impact on your productivity and well-being.
Okay, so back to the story. Did our plant manager actually figure out how to use this theory of constraints?
He does.
Okay.
And it's not all on his own. He reconnects with this old physics professor.
Oh, I'm a mentor.
Exactly. And this professor guides him through the process of applying these principles to the factory.
So he's starting to ask the right questions
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, like why is this machine so critical?
Okay.
What happens when it's not working? Are there ways to increase its output without changing the machine itself?
So he's going deeper now.
Exactly. He's moving from reactive to proactive.
I like that.
And that shift in thinking, that's essential for anyone facing these kinds of challenges.
Whether you're running a factory or just managing your to-do list.
Exactly. So before we find out if he actually saves the day,
Yeah.
let's pause and think about what we've learned.
Okay.
We've seen how one problem can spiral out of control,
Right.
but we've also learned about a powerful tool to address those problems at the root.
That's the theory of constraints.
Exactly. And it's not just a business concept. It's a way of thinking that can help us identify and overcome bottlenecks in any system.
And that can lead to greater efficiency, productivity.
Yeah, and even peace of mind.
Okay, so last we left off, our plant manager is starting to, really understand this theory of constraints with the help of his professor. And they're like really trying to apply it to the factory and get things back on track.
Yeah, they actually start to see some real progress.
Okay, so what kind of progress are we talking? Like, did they get like a brand new machine or something?
Well,
No.
nothing like that. They focused on making the most of what they already had.
Oh,
Remember how we talked about keeping that NCX-10 machine running nonstop?
yeah, like making sure it's never idle.
Exactly. So they set up this system where there's always a queue of parts ready to be processed. So there's no downtime waiting for materials.
So they're really like babying this machine.
Yeah, pretty much. And they even bring back Tony, the machinist, who quit.
Really?
Yeah, they realize his expertise is crucial to keep things running smoothly.
So they're focusing on the people too.
Exactly. It's not just about the machines, it's about the team.
Okay, so they're not just like throw money at the problem or like forcing people to work overtime.
They're being strategic about it.
I like that. So what happened? Did they actually meet that deadline?
They did.
No way.
Yeah, by focusing on the constraint, they not only caught up on the late order,
Wow.
but they actually increased the overall output of the whole factory.
So the plant manager, he went from like almost getting fired
Right.
to like saving the day.
It's a pretty impressive turnaround.
That's awesome. But what's the takeaway for our listeners? Like, how can we use this theory of constraints in our own lives?
Well, the cool thing is that these principles, they're universal.
Okay.
Doesn't matter if you're running a business or just trying to be more productive.
Right.
The first step is always to identify your constraint.
So what's holding you back?
Exactly what's your NCX-10 machine.
Right.
It could be procrastination, disorganization, even like a long commute.
Okay. So once you figure out what your bottleneck is,
Yeah, then you can start thinking about how to exploit it.
got to make it work for you.
Exactly, how to maximize its effectiveness.
So it's not about like making these huge changes.
No.
It's about making small strategic improvements.
Right, and remember, it's an ongoing process. There will always be new constraints popping up.
Right.
But the key is to keep looking for those areas where you can optimize.
I like that. So we've gone through this story,
Yeah.
learned about this really cool tool,
The theory of constraints.
and it's not just for factories.
Nope, it can apply to anything.
Yeah, it's about identifying your bottleneck and figuring out how to make it work for you.
Exactly.
All right, well, that was a really fascinating deep dive. I feel like I learned a lot.
Me too.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. And until next time, keep learning and keep exploring.